Hello, I'm Frank Costantino. Welcome to Hudson Valley Woodcrafting. This channel is going to be kind of unique to the woodcrafting community, although I'm not making anything that most people don't already make. But my spin, I guess, is that I'm not just a woodcrafter, but my real occupation is professional chef. So my work is inspired by my interest in cooking and service of food and production of food. So a lot of my crafts revolve around that. My story with woodcrafting and woodworking is really goes back 30-40 years. I started in high school working in construction, working with wood, but in a very different way, right? Building walls and framing walls and putting up kitchen cabinets in construction installations. That was my high school job before I went to culinary school and became a chef and then educator. About 4 years ago, my mom passed, and in all of the preparations for her funeral and such, some time had passed afterwards, and then I received a check for a few $100s from the overage on what the cost of the burial was for my mom. And I had this couple $100, and I said, it'd be interesting. I could put it in the bank, whatever, not think about it, but I wanted to do something that was kind of a little bit of a lasting, thought. So I decided to buy a lathe, and I already had a wood studio doing some different projects, mostly repair stuff and building stuff out of utility. I built some furniture, I built some things, but I had not really gotten into working with a lathe, and that was kind of my inspiration, was to do something that, my lathe was, it kind of reminded me of my mom, and to be able to do something, kind of in a memory a little bit. I started out turning some basic things, some pens and stuff like that, and I started to evolve into some different things. I got better at it. I'm still very much a novice, still learning my craft a little bit with the lathe. But in the interim, over the last year or so, after building cutting board and serving platters and things like that, had the idea to do some work and put it out on display at a crafts show. And things kind of took off from there. So I started some years ago doing cutting boards and things like that, and I have a bunch of boards that I make. Part of my business I do in different sizes. I have a small board, a large board, and I'm using primarily cherry, maple, and walnut as my woods here. I don't use anything exotic. I use stuff that is local, to our area. I've sourced out a great supplier from a mill around here, and I get most of my wood from that. You can see the large board here. From there, working with this mill, I get cutoffs, and a lot of times the cutoffs are quite dramatic, and they remind me of a good service piece. This is an example of just an end cut right off the mill, which I then turned into a serving platter. This is a maple, beautiful, beautiful finish, beautiful grain. I do the same with some side cuts, right, of walnut. Really nice board. And then similarly cherry. And these make some really dramatic presentation boards for charcuterie, for cheese. I know a lot of guys do cheese boards and such, but these kind of inspired me a little bit. And these again, natural, just as they come off the mill. And then some more decorative, interesting work. Do a couple of these cheese boards, and again using maple, cherry, and walnut. And I have a couple different sizes of those boards, and this is intended, we call this our 2-cheese board for a 2-cheese display, and then a 4-cheese board. Anything more than that, we go up to the larger boards. And pizza peel. These sell out at the craft show very quickly, and we use these even here at my house. I love making these. I love shaping them. Love all the sanding work. I know most woodcrafters don't like that, but I really like to see the, the finish emerge, and then when we put the oil and finish on, it looks really good. Of course, with end cuts, little pencil holders that we make. These were inspired by David Picciuto, as was the wine caddy, which is a unique little gift. A lot of people really like that. You kind of put the wine glasses here on the side, and you can carry this out to the table. It's an interesting piece, fun to make. And of course, some coasters. Everybody does coasters, right? These are just little sets of 6, again using offcuts. I put cork on the bottom of my coasters, and I just finish them with a simple water-safe finish. And then on some of the turning stuff that we do. You might have seen in my recent video, my first video on my channel, we did the salt crocks. I do these in all different sizes and shapes. It's called salt boxes or salt cellars. These sit on the counter. We put our sea salt in, our good salts, our finishing salts. I even use these in the kitchen commercially when we have a truffle salt or something we really want to keep it separate from our regular seasoning salts. Of course, pepper mills. These I really love to turn as well. This is a nice walnut, and again, I don't use the same shapes. I use different shapes for each of my turnings. This was a piece of walnut. And then, of course, bowls. And I do bowls in all different sizes and shapes. I do live edge bowls. A lot of my inventory right now has been depleted, but from our last shows during the holidays. But this is a walnut bowl. We have a tulip poplar, some more walnut here. This is actually cherry. This is poplar. And we put a nice finish on those bowls. I pencil them in, sign them up a little bit. And we do different sizes here, different shapes. Again, a lot of the offcuts that I get from the mill, I get a lot of 8/4 and 12/4, and some of them are great for this kind of work, for pepper mills and for bowls and such. And then, of course, we turn the occasional lamp. This was turned for my son. Came over to take some photos of me for my website, and I happened to have a piece of ash on the lathe, and I said, let me do some shots of me turning some of this wood here, and I just said, well, while I got this on the lathe, I'll make you a lamp. And we put a base of one on the bottom with all the wiring, etc. It's a 3-way switch here as well. So we have our lamp. And the first thing I ever started turning, besides pens, and I don't have any pens to show because most of them are sold. They're sold. But some of the first things I turned were these bottle stoppers. I think everybody that gets into turning on the lathe does these stoppers, and these again are made with different cuts of wood. And there are a couple of exotics in here, although I don't really work with exotic woods. I made a commitment to work with locally sourced woods here, and I get an abundance of walnut, cherry, and maple, which are great for cutting boards and great for all kitchen items. So I stay away from exotics. I feel like it's important that I do that. I live on a large piece of property, and at one point on this property we did some farming, certified naturally grown. So I just felt like it was a natural to follow through with that. And some of the wood that I'm actually using is actually wood that we harvested for trees that had fallen during Hurricane Sandy. And they're finally dry enough for us to work with. And I've been working with some of that besides the stuff that we get from the mill. My studio is very basic. I actually split my basement into two. I have a studio for wood, and I have a studio for music. Two of my passions, and of course, cooking is a major passion of mine. It's my actual profession and my livelihood. So my basement is split in two. I have my wood studio and my music studio. And my wood studio has the basic necessities of what I need to be able to mill my rough sawn lumber, my planer, my jointer, I have adequate dust collection, although no one ever has adequate dust collection when you're working with milling materials to the extent that I do. Bandsaw, the smaller bandsaw that I use for some cutout work. Drill press, sander, my lathe, adequate storage. I have another area in my basement where my mechanical room is for storage of other wood material. I have my clamps, everything kind of laid out in a very effective way where I can get a lot of work done. I can batch out things quickly and get things produced pretty quickly, which is important because I do work a full-time job, which is extensive. That is my studio. That is my my YouTube channel. We're going to be doing some things, again, not much that hasn't been done before. I'll put my spin on things. It's always great to add to the community. There are some really wonderful makers out there. I'm inspired by the channels that I see and that I follow. I'm particularly inspired by the wonderful ladies of woodcrafting. The April Wilkersons and Anne of All Trades. I think that they're wonderful. And then, of course, some of the guys, Frank Howworth and David Picciuto and Samurai, right? Of course, and Third Coast. So that's my contribution. Looking forward to putting out some content for you all. Please subscribe to my channel and support my channel. I'll put a link to my website, Hudson Valley Woodcrafting, to see some of my items in my gallery and see what's available from my site. Until our next video, we'll see you. Thanks.